The private jet smelled of expensive perfume and champagne, but to Amelia, it felt like a prison. She sat quietly in her seat, one hand resting on her small baby bump, the other clutching her handbag as if it could give her strength. Her husband, Richard, sat across from her, scrolling through his phone with no care in the world. She had been feeling sick since morning. Her stomach turned, and she pressed her lips together, trying not to vomit. "Richard," she said softly, I don't feel too well." Before he could respond, a woman's sharp voice cut through the quiet. "Ugh, can you not?" It was Melissa, Richard's mistress. Her long red nails tapped impatiently against the armrest. "This is disgusting. I can't believe you brought her with us." Richard sighed and rolled his eyes. "Amelia, please don't start this drama on the plane." "I'm not starting anything," Amelia whispered, tears already filling her eyes. "I can't control it. You know I'm pregnant." Melissa stood up suddenly. "Either she leaves this plane or I do. I can't sit here breathing the same air as her for hours." The jet grew silent. The pilots looked back, unsure of what to do. Amelia's heart pounded. She waited for her husband to say something, anything to defend her. But Richard turned, his face hard and cold. "I'm sorry, my love," he said to Melissa. "I don't even know why I let her come." Then, facing Amelia, his tone turned cruel. "You heard her. Get out." Amelia froze. "What?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "You can't be serious. Get now." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "Richard, please. I'm your wife." "You were my wife," he snapped. "Not anymore." Two security guards walked toward her. "Ma'am, please step outside. Please don't do this to me," she begged, looking at him one last time. "For the sake of our baby." But before she could finish, the guards grabbed her by the arms. Her shoes slipped against the polished floor as they dragged her to the exit. The jet door opened, and cold air rushed in. "Richard," she cried, "please don't do this." He didn't look at her. Instead, he stood up and tossed a brown envelope toward her. It hit the ground beside her trembling feet. "Sign it," he said coldly. "I'm done with this marriage." The guards pushed her down the steps. She landed on the hard ground, clutching her stomach. The sound of the jet's engine roared behind her. She looked up through tears and saw Richard standing by the window, his arm around Melissa, both of them laughing. The jet door closed. A moment later, it lifted off, leaving her alone on the runway. Amelia sat there in silence, her dress stained with dust, her hair messy, her heart broken. She picked up the divorce papers and held them tightly. Her hands shook as she whispered to herself, "What did I ever do to deserve this?" Around her, the world moved on. Planes taking off, workers shouting orders. But for Amelia, everything had stopped. The man who once promised her forever had thrown her away like she was nothing. She placed her hand on her belly, whispering through sobs, "Don't worry, little one. I'll find a way to keep us safe." And with that, Amelia stood up, wiping her tears, not knowing that her painful journey was just beginning, and that fate had something far more beautiful waiting for her. Amelia stood outside the airport, staring at the busy street. Cars moved fast, horns honked, and people rushed by without noticing the woman standing there with tears on her face and a paper in her hand. Her heart felt like it was breaking into 1,000 pieces. The divorce papers shook in her trembling fingers. She wanted to tear them apart, to scream, to ask the sky why her life had turned out this way. But all she could do was whisper, "He really left me." Her voice cracked as she said it. A few people passing by looked at her, curious, but no one stopped to help. Her clothes were wrinkled, her hair messy, and her eyes red and swollen. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand, but they kept falling. She didn't know where to go. Her house belonged to Richard. The thought of going back there made her stomach twist. Everything inside would remind her of him. Their wedding photos, the couch they used to sit on, the kitchen where he once cooked breakfast for her. Her feet began to move slowly, almost like she was being pulled by the wind. She walked past the parking lot, then down a long road. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky orange and pink. The air was warm, but Amelia felt cold inside. As she walked, memories flooded her mind. Memories of the man she had once loved so deeply. She remembered the first time she met Richard. It was at a small cafe near her old job. He had been charming, confident, and kind. He paid for her coffee when she forgot her wallet and said, "It's okay. Beautiful. Just promise you'll smile for me instead." Back then, his smile had melted her heart. He made her feel like the luckiest woman alive. He would send her flowers every week, write her love notes, and tell her she was his world. When he proposed, he got down on one knee in front of everyone and said, "You are my forever." Her lips trembled as she remembered that moment. "Forever didn't even last 3 years," she whispered bitterly. After their wedding, everything had been perfect at first. Richard was sweet and caring. He talked about building a future together, about having children and traveling the world. But slowly things changed. He became distant. He stayed out late and always had excuses. When she asked questions, he'd get angry. Then one day, she saw the messages on his phone. From Melissa. "Can't wait to see you tonight." One read, followed by a heart emoji. That was the night her world began to crumble. A car honked loudly, pulling her back to reality. Amelia looked around and realized she had been walking for a long time. Her feet ached, and her throat felt dry. She didn't even know where she was anymore. Streetlights flickered on as darkness began to fall. She kept walking, hugging herself. Her tears had dried, but her heart still hurt. She looked down at her stomach, gently rubbing it. "Don't worry, baby," she whispered. "I'll protect you. Even if I have no one else, you have me." Her vision blurred again with tears. The world around her seemed to spin. Her legs felt weak. The sound of cars faded until she heard one loud screech. Honk! Amelia froze. A bright light flashed in front of her. Car had stopped just inches away. The driver's door opened quickly, and a man in a black suit ran out. "Hey, are you okay?" he shouted, his voice full of concern. Amelia blinked at him, dazed. She tried to say something, but the words wouldn't come out. Her head felt heavy. The man reached her just as her knees gave way. "Oh my God," he said, catching her before she hit the ground. Her head rested against his chest, her eyes fluttering closed. Miss, can you hear me?" But Amelia didn't respond. Her body went limp in his arms. The man looked at her pale face and then at her stomach. His eyes widened when he noticed her pregnancy. He hadn't hit her. She had just collapsed. Still, his heart raced with worry. "Hang in there," he whispered, carefully lifting her into his arms. "You'll be okay." He rushed her into his car, shouting for his driver to head to the nearest hospital. As the car sped off, Amelia's head rested against his shoulder, and for the first time in a long while, she looked peaceful, like she was finally away from the pain. The man glanced at her again, not knowing that this fragile stranger lying in his arms was about to change his life forever. The hospital smelled like clean floors and medicine. Bright lights shone above, and nurses hurried past with clipboards in their hands. Adrian Cole sat in the waiting area, his heart still racing from what had just happened. He had never been so scared in his life. The woman he had picked up from the road looked so pale and fragile. He couldn't stop thinking about her face, the sadness in her eyes even before she fainted. When the doctor finally came out, Adrian jumped up from his chair. "Doctor, how is she? Is she going to be okay?" The doctor smiled gently. "She's fine. She fainted because of exhaustion and stress. She's also pregnant, so she needs rest and care." Adrian let out a deep breath of relief. "Thank God," he said, rubbing his forehead. "Can I see her?" The doctor nodded. "She just woke up, but please don't stress her. She's been through a lot." Adrian thanked him and walked toward the room. When he opened the door quietly, he saw her sitting up in bed, staring out the window. Her eyes were red from crying, and her hands rested protectively over her belly. He took a slow step closer. "Hi," he said softly. I'm the guy who almost ran into you. Amelia turned quickly, startled. Oh, she began, then stopped, looking embarrassed. I'm sorry if I scared you. He shook his head. You didn't scare me. You scared yourself. You just fainted. And I thought something terrible happened. A small, tired smile appeared on her lips. Thank you for bringing me here. It's nothing, he replied, pulling a chair close to her bed. You were walking in the middle of the road, lost in thought. What happened to you? For a moment, Amelia didn't speak. Her eyes filled with tears again, and her voice came out in a whisper. My husband, he left me. He threw me out of his plane. And then, he gave me divorce papers. Adrian's brows furrowed in disbelief. He what? She nodded, her lips trembling. He was with another woman. I tried to talk to him, but he said I disgusted him because I'm pregnant. He told security to throw me out. Adrian sat in silence, anger rising in his chest. He couldn't believe any man could treat a woman like that, especially one carrying his child. That's awful, he said quietly. You didn't deserve that. Amelia looked down at her hands. I don't even know where to go now. I have no family. I just kept walking because I didn't know what else to do. He leaned forward, his voice gentle. You don't have to worry right now. What you need is rest and food. I'll make sure you're okay. She looked up at him, surprised. You don't even know me. Adrian gave her a kind smile. Maybe not yet, but I know enough to see you're someone who's been hurt and needs help. Let me help you. Her eyes softened, and tears slipped down her cheeks. Thank you, she whispered. You're very kind. He reached for the small table beside her and poured a glass of water. Drink this. You need strength for your baby. Amelia took the glass, her hands still shaking. For the first time in days, she felt a little safer. The pain was still there, but so was something new. A small spark of hope. Adrian stood up after a few minutes. I'll check on you tomorrow. Don't worry about the bills. I'll take care of everything. She blinked in surprise. You really don't have to. I want to, he said firmly, smiling. Just rest, okay? As he turned to leave, Amelia watched him go. She didn't know who he was or why he was being so kind, but deep inside, she felt something shift, like maybe the world wasn't as cruel as she thought. Adrian walked down the hallway, his mind full of questions. Who was she? Why did her husband do that to her? And why, out of nowhere, did he feel such a strong need to protect her? He didn't have the answers yet, but one thing was clear. This woman had entered his life for a reason, and he wasn't going to walk away. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the small hospital window, touching Amelia's face gently. She opened her eyes slowly, her body still weak but her mind clearer than before. She turned her head and noticed a tray of food beside her bed, warm porridge, bread, and a bottle of water. A nurse entered with a smile. Good morning, ma'am. How are you feeling today? Amelia tried to smile back. Better, thank you. That's good. The man who brought you here came earlier. He said he'd be back soon, the nurse said kindly before leaving the room. Amelia's heart warmed a little. She didn't even know the man's name, but his kindness had already touched her heart. No one had cared for her like that in a long time, not since before her marriage fell apart. She leaned back against her pillow, remembering everything that had happened. The humiliation on the plane, Richard's cruel words, the way he had thrown divorce papers at her like she meant nothing. Every memory stung like a fresh wound. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. Adrian stepped in, holding a small bouquet of flowers and a paper bag. Hey, he said with a warm smile. I brought you breakfast, but it looks like I'm late. Amelia smiled faintly. The nurse beat you to it. Then I guess I'll leave this for later, he said, placing the bag on the table. Inside were some fruits, a box of milk, and a chocolate bar. I thought you might like something sweet. Her lips curved slightly. You didn't have to do all this. He shrugged. I know, but I wanted to. He pulled up a chair and sat down beside her. For a few minutes they sat in silence. Amelia looked down at her hands, unsure of what to say. Adrian studied her face. He could see the tiredness, the pain, the heartbreak that still lingered in her eyes. Finally, she spoke. "I still can't believe it happened. The man I loved. He looked at me like I was nothing." Adrian leaned forward slightly. "You didn't do anything wrong, Amelia. Some people don't know how to value good hearts until it's too late." She looked up, surprised. You know my name?" He smiled. "I asked the nurse earlier. I figured calling you the lady I almost ran into would sound strange." A small laugh escaped her lips, the first real laugh she'd had in days. "You're right. That would sound weird." Adrian chuckled softly. That's better. You should laugh more often. It suits you." Her eyes softened. "You're very kind. I don't even know how to thank you." "You don't need to," he replied gently. "Just promise me one thing. Don't give up on life because of what that man did to you." She sighed, her hand resting on her belly. "It's not easy. Every time I close my eyes, I remember the way he looked at me. I feel like I lost everything." Adrian shook his head. "You haven't lost everything. You still have your baby. And maybe you just lost the wrong person so you could meet better people." Amelia's throat tightened with emotion. She didn't know why his words touched her so deeply. Maybe it was because, for the first time, someone saw her pain and didn't turn away. She wiped her tears quietly. "Thank you, Adrian, for saving me, for listening, for everything." He smiled softly. "Anytime." The room fell quiet again, but this time it was a peaceful silence. Outside, birds chirped faintly, and sunlight filled the space with warmth. After a while, Adrian stood up. "You'll be discharged soon, but you'll need somewhere safe to stay. Do you have anyone you can call?" Amelia shook her head. "No one. My parents are gone, and I don't have close friends anymore." Richard made sure of that. Adrian nodded slowly. "Then I'll help you. I have a small apartment near the city. It's quiet, clean, and safe. You can stay there until you figure things out." Her eyes widened. "Oh no, I can't accept that." "You can," he said gently but firmly. "And you will. You need rest and peace, not pride right now." Tears filled her eyes again, but this time they weren't from sadness. They were from gratitude. "I don't know what to say. Just say you'll take care of yourself," Adrian said, smiling. She nodded slowly. "I will." When he left the hospital that day, Amelia watched him from her window. She didn't know who he really was or why he cared so much, but in her heart, she felt something new. Hope. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't completely alone. And though she didn't know it yet, Adrian's kindness was the beginning of a new chapter in her life. A chapter filled with healing, friendship, and maybe, just maybe, love. The next few days passed slowly for Amelia. She stayed in the small, cozy apartment Adrian had found for her. A quiet place with cream-colored walls, soft curtains, and a balcony that let in the evening breeze. It wasn't fancy, but it felt peaceful. For the first time in weeks, she could sleep without hearing the echoes of her husband's cruel words. Adrian had made sure she was comfortable. He stocked the kitchen with food, paid the rent, and even left her a phone in case she needed anything. Every morning, he would stop by before heading to work, checking on her and making sure she ate properly. One evening, Amelia sat on the couch holding a cup of tea. Her belly had started to grow a little, and she rested her hand on it with a small smile. "You're safe now," she whispered to her baby. "We're safe." A gentle knock came on the door. She stood up slowly and opened it. Adrian stood there with his usual calm smile, holding a paper bag. "Evening," he said. "I brought something for dinner. I didn't trust you not to skip a meal again." Amelia laughed softly. "You act like my big brother sometimes." He stepped inside, placing the bag on the table. "Then maybe I'm doing my job well." He started taking out boxes of warm food. The smell of fried rice and grilled chicken filled the room. As they ate together, Amelia told him more about her past. The dreams she once had, the things she gave up for her marriage. "I wanted to be an interior designer," she said, her eyes distant. "I even got accepted into a design school before I met Richard. But he told me it wasn't necessary, that he'd take care of everything." Adrian listened quietly, his heart aching for her. "And now?" he asked gently. "What do you want to do?" She thought for a moment. "I don't know yet. Maybe I just want to feel normal again. To live without fear or pain." He nodded. "That's a good place to start." A few moments later, Amelia's phone beeped. She picked it up, her face instantly falling. Adrian noticed the change in her expression. "What's wrong?" he asked. Her eyes watered as she handed him the phone. It was a message from her ex-husband's lawyer. "He wants to finalize the divorce," she said in a shaky voice. "They've set a date for the court hearing." Adrian's brows furrowed. "When?" "Next week," she whispered. "I don't know if I can do it, Adrian." Seeing him again. Seeing her. Her voice broke. Adrian moved closer, resting a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Hey, look at me." She lifted her eyes, tears glistening in them. "You're stronger than you think. You've already survived the worst part. This is just the final step to your freedom." She sniffled, trying to smile. "You really think so?" "I know so," he said with a reassuring grin. "And you won't be alone. I'll go with you." Amelia blinked, surprised. "You'd really do that?" "Of course. I gave you my word. I'm not letting you face this alone." Her heart warmed at his words. She had heard many promises in her life, but this one felt different. It wasn't empty or forced. It was real. Later that night, when Adrian left, Amelia stood by the window watching his car disappear down the quiet street. The world outside was still and calm. She pressed a hand to her chest and whispered, "Maybe not everyone leaves." The next few days, she focused on preparing herself emotionally. She ate healthier, rested more, and talked to her baby as if the little one could hear her. Every time she saw Adrian, he would find new ways to make her smile. A funny story from work, a silly drawing, or her favorite snacks. On the evening before the court date, Adrian stopped by once more. He brought her a bouquet of white lilies. "For courage," he said with a soft grin. Amelia took them, her eyes shining. "Thank you for everything, Adrian. I don't think I'd have made it this far without you." He looked at her for a moment, his voice low. "You would have. You just needed someone to remind you how strong you are." That night, as Amelia lay in bed, she felt calm for the first time in a long while. She knew tomorrow wouldn't be easy, but with Adrian by her side, she wasn't afraid anymore. Somewhere deep inside, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. And though she didn't yet realize it, the man who had entered her life by chance was slowly becoming the one her heart would never forget. The next morning, Amelia woke up early. Her heart pounded as she stood in front of the mirror, trying to calm herself. She had barely slept, her mind full of memories and fears. Today was the day she would finally end her marriage. She looked at her growing belly and whispered, "We'll be okay, I promise." A knock came on the door. It was Adrian, looking calm and confident in a gray suit. He smiled warmly when she opened the door. "Ready. As ready as I'll ever be," she said with a nervous laugh. "Don't worry," he replied gently. "Just hold your head high and remember, you have nothing to be ashamed of." He offered her his arm and she took it. Together they drove to the courthouse. The ride was quiet, filled only with the sound of soft music from the car radio. Amelia kept her hands on her lap, twisting her fingers nervously. Adrian glanced at her a few times and said softly, "Breathe, you're not alone." When they arrived, reporters and people crowded the entrance, snapping pictures and whispering. Amelia's stomach twisted when she saw Richard's car parked in front. For a moment, she wanted to turn back, but Adrian's steady hand on her shoulder gave her courage. Inside the courtroom, her heart almost stopped when she saw him, Richard, standing tall and proud beside Melissa, who clung to his arm like she owned the world. They looked perfect together, dressed in expensive clothes and fake smiles. Amelia's knees felt weak, but she forced herself to sit. She didn't want them to see her break. When the hearing started, the lawyer read out the divorce terms. Richard's voice was cold when he answered questions, acting as if Amelia was a stranger. Every word cut through her heart. She tried not to cry, but when he smirked at her from across the room, her eyes filled with tears. Adrian noticed and quietly reached for her hand under the table. His touch was gentle but strong, reminding her that she wasn't alone anymore. After what felt like hours, the judge declared the marriage officially over. The sound of the gavel echoed in her ears. It was done. Just like that, years of love, pain, and memories were gone. Amelia stood up slowly, her body trembling. Adrian led her out of the courtroom, blocking her view of Richard and Melissa as they walked past. Once outside, the cool air hit her face, and she finally let out the tears she'd been holding back. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't want to cry." Adrian shook his head. "Don't apologize. You've held it in for too long." She wiped her face, trying to smile. "It's just, I thought I was strong enough. But seeing him again, it hurt." "I know," Adrian said softly. "But it's over now. You're free. It's time to start over." He opened the car door for her, and instead of heading home, he took a different route. Amelia frowned slightly. "Where are we going?" "You'll see," he said with a small grin. A few minutes later, they stopped in front of a colorful little ice cream shop. Amelia blinked in surprise. "Ice cream? Really? Really?" Adrian said, laughing. "Court hearings are stressful. You deserve something sweet." She couldn't help but laugh a little too. They went inside, and the cold air and cheerful smell of chocolate lifted her mood. Adrian ordered for both of them, strawberry for her, vanilla for himself. They sat by the window watching kids laugh and families walk by. "See," he said playfully, "the world still has nice things." Amelia took a spoonful and smiled for the first time that day. "You're right. This is actually nice." "Good," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Now, tell me one good thing about today." She thought for a moment, then said softly, "That I'm finally free, and that you came with me." Adrian smiled warmly. "That's two good things." They talked for a long time, about their favorite foods, movies, and silly things from their childhood. For a while, Amelia forgot her pain. The laughter between them felt easy and real. When they finished their ice cream, Adrian looked at her seriously. "You know, Amelia, I don't think it was an accident that we met." She tilted her head. "What do you mean?" He smiled softly. "Maybe sometimes life breaks us just so we can meet the people meant to put us back together." Her heart fluttered at his words. She didn't know what to say, so she just smiled, her eyes glistening. Not with pain this time, but with something new, hope. As they stepped out into the golden sunset, she whispered a quiet thank you under her breath. Not just to Adrian, but to life itself, for giving her another chance to smile again. The next morning felt different for Amelia. For the first time in months, she woke up without feeling heavy inside. The sun peeked through her curtains, and she smiled as she rubbed her little baby bump. "Good morning, my sweet one," she whispered. "We're really starting over." After the court hearing, Adrian had insisted she rest for a few days. But true to his word, he had also offered her a job in his company. At first, she thought he was joking. "You want me to work for you?" she had asked, laughing. "Yes," Adrian said with a grin. "You're smart, creative, and you need something to focus on, something that's yours." Amelia had hesitated at first. She hadn't worked in years, and she was nervous about going back into an office. But deep inside, she wanted to try. She wanted to rebuild her life, to stand on her own again. Now, as she stood in front of the mirror fixing her hair, she felt a little spark of excitement. She wore a simple blue dress that fit comfortably around her belly. Her reflection showed a tired but determined woman, someone who had survived the worst and was ready to live again. A knock came at the door. When she opened it, Adrian's driver stood there, smiling politely. "Good morning, ma'am. Mr. Cole sent me to take you to the office." She nodded, feeling her heart race. "Thank you." As the car drove through the busy city streets, Amelia looked out the window. The tall buildings and people rushing to work made her feel like she was finally part of the world again. When the car stopped in front of a tall glass tower with the name Cole Enterprises shining in silver letters, she took a deep breath. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. Inside the building, Everything looked sleek and modern. The employees walked around confidently, dressed in sharp suits and heels. Amelia felt a few stares as she walked in, people whispering, curious about who she was. She ignored them and followed the assistant who led her to the meeting room. "Mr. Cole will join you shortly," the assistant said with a kind smile. A few minutes later, Adrian walked in. He looked different in his formal navy blue suit, confident, powerful, but still gentle when he smiled at her. "Welcome to your first day," he said cheerfully. "Don't worry about the stairs. Everyone's just curious." Amelia smiled nervously. "I guess I'm not used to all this anymore." "You'll fit in faster than you think," Adrian said, handing her a folder. "We're reviewing a presentation today. I'd like you to share your thoughts after you go through it." When the meeting started, Amelia sat quietly at first, listening to others discuss the company's new project, a real estate design for a luxury resort. She took notes carefully, her designer's instincts coming alive again. Halfway through the meeting, Adrian turned to her. "Amelia, do you have any suggestions?" Everyone turned to look at her. Her heart pounded, but she took a breath and spoke up. "I think the layout could use softer lighting near the lounge areas," she said confidently. "It would make the place feel warmer and more welcoming, especially for families." The room went silent for a moment. Then Adrian smiled. "That's an excellent idea." A few others nodded in agreement, impressed. Amelia's cheeks warmed, but she couldn't hide her smile. After the meeting, Adrian met her outside the conference room. "You did great in there," he said proudly. "See? I told you that you belonged here." She laughed shyly. "I didn't think they'd even listen." "Well, they did," he said. "And they'll listen again. You have a great eye for design." As the day went by, Amelia settled into her new role. She worked hard, asked questions, and learned quickly. She even caught herself laughing a few times with her new coworkers. Felt good, like she was finally building something for herself. When evening came, she stepped out of the building and saw Adrian waiting by his car. "You're still here?" she asked, surprised. "I told you I'd drive you home today," he said with a grin. During the ride, they talked about work and plans for the new project. But as they got closer to her apartment, Adrian took a different turn. "Where are we going?" Amelia asked, raising an eyebrow. He smiled mysteriously. "It's a surprise." A few minutes later, they stopped in front of a beautiful apartment building. It wasn't too big, but it looked elegant and peaceful. Adrian turned to her and handed her 2 small keys. "What's this?" she asked, confused. "One key is for this apartment," he said softly. "The other is for your car downstairs. You've done so much to rebuild your life. You deserve something better, something comfortable for you and your baby." Amelia's eyes filled with tears. "Adrian, I can't accept this." "Yes, you can," he said, smiling. "Consider it a gift from a friend who believes in you." Tears rolled down her cheeks as she hugged him tightly. "Thank you for everything. You've done more for me than anyone ever has." He gently wiped her tears. "You deserve happiness, Amelia. Don't ever forget that." That night, as she walked through her new apartment, Amelia smiled through her tears. Life had torn her apart, but somehow, piece by piece, Adrian was helping her put herself back together again. The days turned into weeks, and Amelia slowly began to feel alive again. Her new apartment was warm and full of light. There were flowers on the table that Adrian brought her every few days and soft music playing on the radio as she worked on her designs. The air felt peaceful, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Adrian often stopped by after work. Sometimes he brought food, other times he brought laughter. He had a way of making her forget her worries, even if just for a moment. They would sit on the balcony and talk about everything, from their favorite childhood memories to what they wanted for the future. One evening, as the orange glow of sunset filled the living room, Adrian helped her hang tiny stars above the baby's crib. "There," he said proudly. "Now your little one can sleep under the stars every night." Amelia smiled, watching him. "You're surprisingly good at decorating for someone who runs a company." He chuckled. "I'm full of surprises." They both laughed. The sound filled the room, light and warm. For the first time, Amelia realized she wasn't just grateful for Adrian's help. She genuinely enjoyed being around him. As the days went by, their friendship grew deeper. Sometimes they cooked together, joking about who could make the better meal. Adrian always pretended his cooking was perfect, even when it wasn't. One night, after a long day at work, Amelia made spaghetti and invited him over. The smell filled the apartment. Adrian took one bite and said dramatically, "This is so good. I might fire my chef." Amelia laughed so hard she almost dropped her fork. "You don't even cook." "Exactly," he said, pretending to be serious. "That's why I need someone who can." She rolled her eyes but smiled. For a moment, everything felt simple and beautiful. After dinner, they sat in the nursery. The walls were painted a soft cream, and little toys sat neatly on the shelves. Adrian helped her arrange tiny clothes in the dresser while they talked about baby names. "What about Liam?" Adrian asked. Amelia tilted her head. Too common." He laughed. "Okay, then what would you name him?" She thought for a moment, her fingers gently brushing over a baby blanket. "Daniel," she said softly. "It was my father's name." Adrian smiled warmly. "Daniel Cole. That sounds perfect." Her cheeks warmed at how easily he said it, like they were already a family. They spent hours talking, laughing, and sometimes sitting in quiet comfort. When the clock struck 10, Amelia yawned and leaned against the crib. "I'm so tired," she murmured. Adrian stepped closer and gently helped her sit down. "You should rest. I'll finish tidying up." She smiled sleepily. "You don't have to." "I want to," he interrupted softly. "Go rest." As she looked up at him, their eyes met. For a moment, neither of them looked away. The world outside seemed to pause. Then, without thinking, they moved closer, so close she could feel his breath. Their lips met in a soft, short kiss. It wasn't planned. It just happened, gentle, warm, and full of unspoken feelings. When they pulled apart, both froze, surprised by what had just happened. Adrian blinked and took a small step back. I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I shouldn't have." Amelia touched her lips, her heart racing. "It's okay," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if it really was. Adrian ran a hand through his hair, clearly nervous. "I should go." "Adrian," she started, but he was already heading for the door. Before leaving, he turned back, his voice soft. "Good night, Amelia." When the door closed behind him, the apartment felt strangely quiet. Amelia sat on the couch, touching her lips again. She couldn't stop replaying the moment. The warmth, the softness, the way her heart had raced. Across town, Adrian drove home in silence, his thoughts spinning. He had never meant to cross that line, but something about Amelia drew him in, a kind of kindness and strength he couldn't ignore. That night, neither of them could sleep. Amelia stared at the ceiling, her hand on her chest, whispering to herself, "Why can't I stop thinking about that kiss?" And miles away, Adrian whispered the same question. The next morning came with soft sunlight slipping through the curtains. Amelia sat on the edge of her bed, her mind still replaying the kiss from last night. She could still feel it, the warmth, the rush, and the way Adrian had looked at her before pulling away. Her heart fluttered, but then a wave of confusion hit her. What did it mean? She stood up, trying to shake the thought away. "It was just a moment," she whispered to herself. "Nothing more." But deep down, she knew it wasn't true. Before she could think further, a sharp pain hit her lower stomach. She gasped, clutching her belly. At first, she thought it was just the baby kicking, but the pain grew stronger. "No, not now," she whispered, panic rising in her chest. She tried to reach for her phone on the bedside table, but another wave of pain made her cry out. Her water broke suddenly, soaking the sheets. Tears filled her eyes. "Please, not alone," she whispered as she grabbed the phone and dialed Adrian's number. He answered on the second ring, his voice groggy with sleep. "Amelia? What's wrong?" Her voice trembled. It's time. The baby. Adrian, please." He shot out of bed instantly. "I'm on my way." "Hold on, Amelia. Just hold on." Within minutes, Adrian arrived at her apartment, his hair messy and his eyes full of worry. He found her sitting on the floor, pale and shaking. "It hurts," she cried softly. He crouched beside her, gently lifting her into his arms. "I've got you," he said firmly. "You and the baby will be okay." He carried her to his car, speeding through the quiet streets toward the hospital. The whole time, Amelia gripped his hand tightly, tears rolling down her face. "I'm scared," she whispered. He squeezed her hand. "Don't be. You're the strongest person I know." At the hospital, nurses rushed her into the delivery room. Adrian tried to follow, but one of them stopped him. "Sir, you can't go in yet." He nodded reluctantly, pacing outside the door, his heart pounding in his chest. He could hear her cries through the wall, and it tore at him. "Come on, Amelia," he muttered. "You can do this." Hours passed like years. He couldn't sit still. He stood outside the room, praying silently. When the door finally opened, the doctor came out, smiling. "Congratulations," he said. "Both mother and baby are fine. It's a boy." Adrian felt relief wash over him. "Thank God," he whispered, running into the room. Inside, Amelia lay on the bed, exhausted but glowing. She was holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. Her eyes lit up when she saw him. "Hey!" she whispered weakly, smiling. "Meet our little one." Adrian's eyes softened as he leaned closer. The baby was small, his tiny hands curled into fists. "He's perfect," Adrian said quietly. She smiled, tears forming in her eyes. "He looks like you," she joked softly. He laughed through his own tears. "I'll take that as a compliment." Then his tone turned serious. He reached into his pocket, knelt beside her bed, and held out a small velvet box. "Amelia," he said, his voice trembling, "you've changed my life in ways I can't explain. You showed me what real strength and kindness look like. Please, let's be a family. Marry me." Amelia's breath caught. "Adrian." He looked up at her with hope in his eyes. "You and your son deserve love, not loneliness. I want to give you both that. Forever." Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you." Adrian smiled with relief and slipped the ring on her finger. He kissed her forehead gently, whispering, "You'll never be alone again." As he cradled the baby in his arms, Amelia watched them with tears of joy. After everything she had been through, the betrayal, the pain, the heartbreak, life had finally given her something beautiful. She smiled weakly and whispered, "We're finally home." A month later, the hospital days were behind them, and Amelia's life had changed completely. The quiet apartment where she once cried alone was now filled with laughter, warmth, and love. Baby Daniel had become the light of her world, and Adrian's too. Their wedding was small but beautiful. The ceremony took place in a garden surrounded by blooming flowers and golden sunlight. Amelia wore a simple white gown that made her look like an angel. Adrian stood at the altar in a navy blue suit, his eyes fixed on her the entire time. When she reached him, he whispered, "You look perfect." She smiled shyly. "You always say that." "Because it's always true," he replied softly. As the pastor began to speak, Amelia's mind wandered for a moment. She thought of how far she had come. From the woman thrown off a plane in tears to the woman standing here, loved and safe. She looked at Adrian, and her heart filled with gratitude. He wasn't just her savior. He was her second chance at life. When they said their vows, her voice trembled, but her words came straight from her heart. "Adrian, you walked into my life when I was broken. You believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. I promise to love you and stand by you, no matter what life brings." Adrian took her hands and said, "Amelia, you've shown me what real love means. Patient, kind, and forgiving. You made me a better man, and I'll spend every day proving that you made the right choice by saying yes." When the pastor said, "You may now kiss the bride," Adrian cupped her face gently and kissed her, slow and full of love. The guests clapped, some even wiping tears. Amelia laughed through her own tears, feeling her heart finally heal. After the ceremony, they had a small party at Adrian's family home. The backyard was decorated with fairy lights, candles, and flowers. Everyone laughed, danced, and celebrated. Amelia couldn't stop smiling as she held baby Daniel in her arms, watching Adrian play with the little one. At one point, Adrian came to her side, placing his arm around her shoulders. "So, Mrs. Cole," he said playfully, "how does it feel to have a husband who can't stop looking at you?" She giggled softly. "It feels perfect." He kissed her forehead and whispered, "You and Daniel are my everything." As the night went on, music played softly in the background. Amelia and Adrian danced under the stars, their baby sleeping peacefully in a small crib beside them. "I never thought I'd find happiness again," Amelia whispered. Adrian smiled, holding her close. "That's what love does. It finds you when you least expect it." She rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. For the first time in a long while, she felt completely at peace. Later that night, when everyone had gone home, Amelia stood by the window of their new home, watching the moonlight spill across the floor. Adrian walked up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "Do you ever think about the past?" he asked quietly. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but not with pain anymore. It reminds me of how strong I've become, and how lucky I am now." Adrian smiled and kissed her cheek. "And I'm the lucky one, Amelia. You gave me a family, and that's more than I could ever ask for." She turned around, looking into his eyes. "No," she said softly. "We gave each other a family." They shared another kiss, gentle and full of warmth. Outside, the stars shimmered above them, and inside their home, laughter and love filled the air. After everything they had faced, betrayal, heartbreak, and pain, Amelia had finally found her happily ever after. And this time, it wasn't built on money or status. It was built on love that was pure, patient, and real. It was a peaceful afternoon. The house was quiet. The smell of freshly baked cookies filled the air, and baby Daniel was napping in his crib. Amelia sat by the window with her laptop, finishing some design sketches for one of Adrian's projects. The soft sound of music played in the background. It was one of those calm, happy days that made her thankful for the life she had now. Adrian had gone to work early that morning, but before leaving, he kissed her forehead and said, "Don't wait up for me tonight. I might be home late." Amelia smiled at the memory. He never left without saying goodbye. She was just about to make herself a cup of tea when the doorbell rang. She glanced at the clock. It was too early for Adrian to be home. Wiping her hands on a towel, she walked to the door and opened it. Her smile faded instantly. Standing at the door was a man she thought she'd never see again. Richard, her ex-husband. His once handsome face was tired and unshaven, and his clothes were worn out and dirty. He looked nothing like the proud man who had humiliated her months ago. "Amelia," he said quietly, almost in a whisper. Amelia's heart skipped a beat. She wanted to shut the door, but her hands froze. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly. "Please, I just need to talk," he said. "5 minutes. That's all." She hesitated, torn between anger and curiosity. Against her better judgment, she stepped aside. "Fine. 5 minutes." He walked in slowly, looking around the bright, beautiful living room. "You've done well for yourself," he said bitterly. Amelia crossed her arms. "What do you want, Richard?" He sighed heavily, sitting on the edge of the couch. "Melissa left me," he began, his voice breaking. "She tricked me into investing everything I had into a fake company. It was all a scam. She took the money and disappeared." Amelia blinked, stunned. "So you're broke?" He nodded shamefully. "Everything's gone. The cars, the house, even my company. I don't have anyone left." Amelia. A small part of her wanted to feel sorry for him, but another part remembered the way he had treated her. The humiliation, the cruel words, the day he threw her out. "You made your choice, Richard," she said quietly. "You chose her." He looked up at her with regret in his eyes. "I know, and I was wrong. I'm so sorry for everything I did to you. Amelia sighed and shook her head. I already forgave you a long time ago. Not for you but for me. Holding on to that pain was only hurting me. He smiled weakly. Thank you. That means more than you know. For a moment there was silence. Then his eyes flickered toward the hallway. I heard you have a child, he said carefully. Can I see him? Amelia's face hardened immediately. No, she said firmly. You lost that right the day you called my pregnancy disgusting. You didn't want this child then, so you don't get to claim him now. Richard stood up, his tone changing. Amelia, don't do this. He's my blood. She glared at him. He's my son, and you will never come near him. Now leave. Richard's jaw tightened, anger flashing in his eyes. You'll regret this, he said coldly. Before she could respond, he turned and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. Amelia stood there trembling, her heart racing. A few minutes later, she picked up her phone and called Adrian. When he answered, she spoke quickly, her voice shaky. Adrian, he came here. Richard. He looked terrible, said Melissa left him. He wanted to see Daniel. Adrian's voice was calm but serious. Are you okay? Did he hurt you? No, but I'm scared, she admitted. I'll be home soon, he said firmly. Don't open the door for anyone else. Promise me. I promise. When she hung up, Amelia sat on the couch, holding baby Daniel in her arms. She kissed his forehead and whispered, Don't worry, sweetheart. I won't let anyone take you away from me. She looked out the window into the darkening sky, unaware that Richard's shadow was still nearby, watching from across the street, his eyes full of anger and something far more dangerous. The peace she had known was about to be tested again. The night was calm, the kind of peaceful silence Amelia had grown used to. She had just finished feeding baby Daniel and tucked him gently into his crib. The baby's soft breathing filled the room, and she smiled, brushing his tiny hand with her finger. Good night, my little angel, she whispered before turning off the light and heading to her bedroom. Adrian had called earlier, saying he'd be home late because of a meeting. So Amelia decided to stay up a little longer to finish some work on her laptop. She made a cup of tea, sat by the living room window, and let the night breeze touch her face. Everything felt perfect, quiet, and safe. But outside, hidden behind the tall fence, a pair of eyes watched her every move. It was Richard. His clothes were torn, and his face was shadowed by anger. The sight of Amelia's new life, her beautiful home, and the baby he once rejected filled him with bitter jealousy. You took everything from me, he muttered to himself. Now, I'll take what matters most to you. When the lights in the house went off, Richard made his move. He climbed over the fence, landing quietly on the grass. Moving like a shadow, he crept toward the nursery window, which was slightly open. Inside, Daniel slept peacefully, unaware of the danger near him. Richard pushed the window open carefully, reached in, and lifted the baby from the crib. Daniel stirred slightly but didn't cry. Holding the child close, Richard climbed back out and disappeared into the darkness. Hours later, Amelia woke suddenly with a strange feeling. Her heart raced for no reason. She sat up, listening. Something didn't feel right. She quickly went to check on her baby, but when she opened the nursery door, her heart froze. The crib was empty. No, 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 she screamed, dropping to her knees. Daniel! Her cries filled the house. Adrian, who had just returned home, rushed upstairs. What happened? He's gone, Amelia sobbed. Our baby's gone. Adrian ran to the security room and pulled up the CCTV footage. They both watched in horror as Richard appeared on the screen, carrying the baby out of the house. Amelia covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. He took him, she whispered. He took my baby. Adrian immediately called the police. Within minutes, officers arrived and began tracking Richard's location using his phone signal. But before they could find him, Amelia's phone rang. It was Richard. Hello, Amelia, his cold voice said. If you ever want to see your child again, bring $3 million to the address I'll send you. Come alone. No police or you'll never see him again. Amelia's hands shook as she held the phone. Please, Richard, don't hurt him. He's just a baby. 3 million, he repeated. You have 2 hours. The call ended. Amelia broke down, crying uncontrollably. Adrian wrapped his arms around her. We'll get him back, he promised. I swear to you. Soon, the police traced the location Richard had mentioned and set up a plan. They told Amelia to go alone, but undercover officers would be nearby, waiting for the right moment to move in. 2 hours later, Amelia arrived at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, holding a bag filled with fake money that looked real. Her hands trembled as she walked inside. Richard, she called out. I'm here. Please, just give me my baby. Richard stepped out from the shadows, holding Daniel in his arms. The baby was crying now, and Amelia's heart broke. Put him down, please, she begged. Drop the bag, Richard ordered. Now. She set the bag down and slowly stepped forward, tears running down her face. You don't have to do this, she said softly. I already forgave you. Just let him go. Richard hesitated for a second, but before he could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed behind him. Police officers rushed in from every direction. Drop the baby, one of them shouted. Richard turned in panic. You lied to me, he screamed. Amelia used the moment to run forward. She grabbed Daniel from his arms and shielded him tightly against her chest. The police tackled Richard to the ground, handcuffing him as he shouted and struggled. When it was finally over, Adrian ran to her side. Are you both okay? He asked breathlessly. Amelia nodded through tears. Yes, we're fine. He pulled her into a tight hug, kissing her forehead. It's over now. Richard was taken away, charged with kidnapping and attempted extortion. The judge later sentenced him to life in prison. As they left the courthouse weeks later, Amelia looked up at the sky, holding Daniel close. No one will ever take you from me again, she whispered. Adrian slipped his hand into hers and smiled. You're safe now, both of you. Together, they walked toward their car, the sun shining down on them. For the first time in forever, Amelia felt completely at peace. The pain, the fear, the heartbreak, it was all behind her. And as she looked at Adrian and her son, she knew one thing for sure. Love had truly won.